There's a Chinese doctor out of Texas, a cancer doctor who worked at a university, you guessed it, who tried to steal a cure for cancer that the university was working on. He was busted, thank goodness. But you have to wonder, for every one of these Chinese nationals or Chinese students who are caught committing theft, committing espionage, for everyone that's caught, you have to wonder how many are not caught. I view it almost the way that I view apprehensions at the border. Yeah, the numbers of people apprehended at the border are huge, but how many got away without apprehension? In 2020, a Stanford University researcher named Chen Song was indicted for visa fraud because she concealed her affiliation with the People's Liberation Army. That's the Chinese military. She came into the United States on this visa, and then she was accused of sending research updates to a Chinese government entity. That seems pretty serious to me. Also in 2020, another Chinese national at Boston University was charged with acting as an agent of a foreign government because, again, she didn't disclose her status as a lieutenant in the PLA, the Chinese military. She was conducting research and she collected information on her colleagues, on U.S. academics and researchers, because that's what the Chinese Communist Party wanted her to do. How creepy is that? In 2019, Laura Ingraham mentioned Harvard. In 2019, at Harvard, another Chinese medical research was apprehended at Boston Logan International Airport trying to smuggle vials of research samples. It was like 21 vials of biological research samples back to China. This individual was accused of stealing the samples and intending to take them to China to steal our medical research. In 2018, another Chinese national, an electrical engineer, it's always the STEM fields, it's medicine, it's science, it's technology, studying at Illinois Institute of Technology, was arrested and then convicted of acting as an unregistered foreign agent for the Chinese government because this individual was working under the direction of Chinese intel, of Chinese spies, to collect biographical data on U.S. scientists and engineers. See, this is the creepy part. It's not just our stuff that they're taking. It's not just intellectual property. It's not just technology. It's not just cancer research. It's information on us, on our people, on you. If you work in the field of medicine, you work in research, you work at a university, Chinese spies are spying not on what you're doing, on you. And you have to wonder, what are they going to do with that information? This individual also tried to recruit Americans to work for the Chinese intel while he was here posing as a graduate student. Again, the examples of this are innumerable. There was another Chinese graduate student in 2020, this time at UCLA, computer science, you guessed it, who was arrested for destroying a hard drive containing research data after being questioned by the FBI. Why? Well, this individual was suspected of trying to transfer software and technical data, sensitive data, to China in collaboration with a Chinese university tied to the Chinese military. Okay, well, this information that he was trying to smuggle had potential military applications. 2 years ago, in 2023, 5 Chinese students from the University of Michigan were charged with suspicious activities near a U.S. military site in Michigan. They were photographing exercises that the U.S. military was taking part in, obviously taking part in espionage. In June 2025, this is 2 months ago, y'all, the Department of Justice charged 2 Chinese citizens with conspiracy, with smuggling goods in the United States, with false statements and visa fraud. Why? Because these 2 foreign nationals were charged with smuggling a fungus that has been described as a potential agro-terrorism weapon into the heartland of the United States of America. Do you know what that would mean? Do you know what the implications of that would be for us? Entirely disruptive of our food chain. We're talking mass starvation if such a fungus were released. And do you trust them not to do it? Well, I don't. Because what was it, 5 years ago? That the Wuhan Institute of Virology, in collaboration with U.S. university researchers, not only engineered the COVID virus, but let it loose. Why wouldn't they do it again? So I'll say it again. You probably reacted the same way that I did. I was surprised President Trump spoke so strongly and in such support of having 600,000 Chinese nationals come to our country and go to our universities. That's not what I want. It's not what I voted for. That's not what you want. That's not what you voted for. And the primary reason for this is because these so-called Chinese students are spies. They're all spies. And yes, I'm aware that when I say that, when I make that statement, the left says, oh, you're a racist against the Chinese. No, I'm not a racist against the Chinese. I am merely observing, or you could even say acknowledging the reality of the situation. And that's what we're going to talk about right now. All right, with me now is Gordon Chang. Gordon's the author of Plan Red, China's Project to Destroy America. You can find Gordon on X at gordongchang.com. And I highly recommend that you follow him, by the way. He's one of the best follows, one of my favorite follows. Always has good and insightful commentary over there. Gordon, I appreciate you coming on the show today, but let me ask you right up front. The left tells us that we are racist against Chinese if we suggest that this 600,000 Chinese students that Trump says he's happy to welcome into our country, when we say, listen, it's not just that there are some spies within the 600,000, that they're all spies or informants for the Chinese Communist Party. The left says we're racist. Are they all spies?
Everyone is potentially a spy because China's 2017 National Intelligence Law, Articles 7 and 14, require every Chinese national and every Chinese entity to commit acts of espionage if they receive a demand from the relevant authorities in China. But it's actually worse than that because the Communist Party runs a top-down system and it demands the absolute obedience of all Chinese nationals and all Chinese entities. So it's not just a question of committing espionage, it's also committing acts of sabotage or anything else that the party wants. So the party has weaponized its nationals, and we have to take that into account. So when we apply special scrutiny to Chinese nationals, that's not racism. That's taking into account what the Chinese regime has in fact done to us.
Okay, so big picture, going back for a second, I was surprised to hear this announcement from President Trump because back in May, Secretary of State Marco Rubio had said essentially the opposite, that we were going to be revoking the visas of Chinese nationals for the reasons you just articulated, and that any new visas were going to face very significant scrutiny. So I was kind of surprised to hear this from President Trump. We covered earlier in the show, after President Trump's announcement, Howard Lutnick, his Commerce Secretary, went on with Laura Ingraham and gave an explanation and said, oh, if we get rid of the Chinese students that are attending elite universities in the United States, then that's going to cause, students at lower universities to filter upward, and the bottom 15% of universities in our country are going to go out of business. And I thought to myself, first of all, I don't believe this is the reason why. It's a dumb reason. We should allow the free market to dictate whether universities survive or fail. It's also not the federal government's business to decide what universities survive or fail. Plus, these universities are indoctrination centers for Marxism. So nothing about Howard Lutnick's response rang true to me. But big picture, what do you see as being behind this change from the Trump administration? What is motivating President Trump to publicly say, yeah, we're great with China, 600,000 students, I want them here?
I guess there are a couple of things, and I'm just guessing, but President Trump mentioned the 600,000 students in connection with comments on trade. So he's probably thinking that when we provide education to Chinese nationals, this is an export of services. And so that helps our balance of trade with China. That's just a guess. Also, of course, there are intense discussions with the Chinese regime about trade, and maybe this came up. So I don't know what's going on there. But obviously, this is sort of like a trade type of thing. And in President Trump's comments yesterday, they actually sort of focused in again on trade. So this is going to be part of a broader conversation that Trump is going to have with Xi Jinping and others in Beijing.
So do you see this as potentially a behind-the-scenes negotiation on trade, specifically like the tariffs between President Trump and Chinese President Xi Jinping, and that this was potentially either a concession that Trump made to Xi Jinping that didn't actually relate to our universities, but maybe regarding tariffs, like, okay, you don't fight back against us on these tariffs, and I'll let your students stay here?
That could very well be part of those discussions. And we got to remember when we look behind that, obviously China believes it's in its best interest to have those Chinese students in our country. And because it believes that we're China's enemy, then that must mean that China doesn't think this is good for us. So we should be taking our clues from all of this. And we know that a certain percentage of students commit espionage against the U.S. There are estimates saying 13% of them. So if you take the 277,000 in the 2023-2024 year, multiply that by 0.13, that's a pretty big number. And it gets a lot bigger when you multiply it by 600,000. And the other thing, Liz, that we don't often think about, wherever there is a concentration of Chinese students in our country, we know that there are Chinese consular officials and even Ministry of State Security agents who monitor, coerce, and surveil them. So if we're going to more than double the number of Chinese students in our country, we can be sure that China's Ministry of State Security is going to be sending more of its agents surreptitiously into our country, because not only do they coerce those Chinese students to commit acts of espionage, we also know that they motivate them to engage in political activities, which that is, by the way, a violation of our sovereignty. So this is not a good story. And I didn't hear President Trump in the last couple of days actually talk about increasing the budget for the FBI to monitor all of those additional Ministry of State Security agents that are coming to America.
And that's a very intriguing point, actually, because there was a story, and Spencer, if you can pull up this story, there was a story about a secret Chinese police base that was hidden here in the United States. They didn't report it to US authorities. They were just here. And we all speculated, because we know that what you just described happens, that these Chinese students are monitored, not just when they go home to the Chinese mainland, they're monitored by Chinese police here in the United States. But there was a Chinese police base that was hidden here in the United States, which is frightening, because Chinese police means law enforcement. That means they answer to the government, which in China is the federal government, which means the Chinese Communist Party. Listen, I don't know everything that's involved in this negotiation between Xi Jinping and President Trump. Yeah, there you go on the screen right now. Chinese agent pleads guilty to operating secret police station in New York. That's leaders of the subheadline says leaders of the Chinese police station have helped Beijing organize counter protests against Falun Gong demonstrations, locate the regime's targets. So Chinese spies, Chinese government hiding out in the United States secretly without the government's knowledge. This is terrifying. So I don't know what President Trump talks about with Xi Jinping. I have a lot of faith in President Trump. I'm a huge supporter of him, especially when it comes to his ability to negotiate these deals, especially when it comes to his ability to get the better of tough characters like Xi Jinping. He's a tough character. He's committed to his ideology. And so part of me sits here and thinks, okay, well, we don't know if this is a concession to Xi Jinping. We don't know what President Trump got in exchange for that. And I don't think President Trump gets taken advantage of very often, if ever. No examples of him being taken advantage of come immediately to my mind. But is there a scenario that you can think of where the trade-off of allowing 600,000 Chinese students into our country would be worth it if Trump were to get XYZ from Xi Jinping?
Yeah, I mean, we'd have to see the entire deal, but this is something that we don't have to do. And so, there's a broader issue here beyond trade, and that is for every Chinese national that takes a place at a college or university, that's one fewer place for an American. And the mission of American colleges and universities is not to train the nationals of a regime that considers us to be an enemy. It is to train Americans, because this is our future, Liz. So I don't think that this should be a part of trade discussions. I don't think this should be traded away, because this is our future.